There are more people now infected with tuberculosis than at any other time in human history.
There's no reason that the world has to sit by and watch 1 million African children die from malaria.
There are now 30-some new diseases that we had never seen before. You know, not something that has been going on forever. This is new.
The microbes know no boundaries, and there is no risk so remote that it can't affect us here.
Despite the advances of medical science, our world is still haunted by the specter of dangerous disease.
The illness came on really quickly. We were in the mountains on Monday, and by Thursday he was on life support.
RX for Survival is the story of the greatest challenges in global health today, and of the people who are meeting them head on.
This is a war. This is the ammunition for the war.
One of global health's best weapons is one of the oldest.
Roll up your sleeve.
Vaccines to protect children from epidemic killers have been around for centuries.
This will only hurt a little.
And they can still do the job today. But the challenges are huge. Dr. Sudeep Singh and his team need to vaccinate 165 million children in less than a week. Antibiotics also continue to save lives, as Dr. Jim Kim knows too well.
We had to go and convince them, please, you need to continue taking your medicines, because if you don't, you're going to die.
An ophthalmologist from Baltimore discovered that 2 drops of vitamin A can mean the difference between life and death for millions of children around the world. Wherever there is creativity and commitment, the landscape of global health is changing.
The bottom line is we can do this. We know how to save lives, and there's no reason for us not to.
Tonight, we begin our journey with vaccines, global health's most powerful weapons in the struggle against disease. But how long will they continue to protect us with the arrival of new killers? And can we find ways to get vaccines to everyone who needs them? Disease Warriors, coming next on RX for Survival. Polio vaccine packed in ice, safe for several days, is being distributed to thousands of vaccinators in northern India. This is the largest public health campaign in the world today, a last-ditch effort to eradicate polio from the face of the planet.
This is a war against polio. This is the ammunition for the war.
And these are the casualties of this war, which has been waged worldwide for over a decade. And the final battle will hopefully be in India, one of the last remaining reservoirs of this relentless crippler. The Indian campaign will target 165 million children, a daunting task, especially in crowded North Indian cities like Aligarh.
Something like 300 this time.
Nason Saba and Sudeep Singh, a local Sikh doctor, are in charge of this densely populated region.
The polio eradication program is the largest public health initiative in the history of humanity. It is huge.
But the question is, will it work? 10 years ago, there were 175,000 polio cases a year in India. Now, there are fewer than 100. But the speed at which polio virus spreads can quickly turn scores of cases into thousands overnight. So vaccinators have to outrace the virus.
We need to get immunity levels to such a height that the virus no longer has a human host.
The polio virus, like any virus, is just a few strands of genetic material wrapped in protein. Unable to live on its own, it invades other cells to survive. In some cases, the virus enters the spinal cord, causing nerve damage and paralysis. Most people only get a cold. But in everyone, the virus lives in the human gut and then spreads in human feces. If excrement with poliovirus reaches these unhygienic open sewers, it can spark a larger outbreak in an instant.
If you really want to put a face to polio transmission, this is it.
Yeah. All the drain water from these sewage is coming here. The hand pump picks it up, and that water is being used as drinking water, and so the infection spreads.
Fortunately, most children who catch the virus don't get sick with the disease. Unfortunately, they can still spread it to others. For the 100 cases of paralysis in India today, there are 20,000 more children quietly spreading the disease all over the country.
If we leave a single child out, we jeopardize the entire program, not only for the state, but for the entire world. Really, it's that serious.
But as organizers begin mobilizing millions throughout India for the vaccination campaign, there are major obstacles to its success. Muslim religious leaders in Aligarh mistakenly believe that the polio vaccine causes impotence, and they warn people of their faith not to take it. And this is the result: paralyzed children.
They came here to the village about 4 to 5 months ago to give the vaccine, and 9 children died. When the same polio vaccinators came back the next time, we all batted them and sent them away. After that, the belief was spread.
But 9 children hadn't died. The rumors were false. And now this rickshaw driver, who believed the stories, carries a son who will be crippled for life.
That is one. We've had cases when villagers have thrown bricks. They have actually shot people.
With house-to-house visits, Nasan Saba and his team of vaccinators are determined to win over religious resistors and prevent more children from being struck down.
Namaskar ji.
But it will not be easy.
We don't want the vaccines at all.
Are you God? Answer me. We only trust God. Hey, please listen to me. There's no one bigger than Allah. Am I right or wrong?
If the vaccinators can't break this cultural resistance, the polio virus will live on here in India, and the great campaign will fail.
Allah keeps my child safe. Who are you to keep him safe?
The arguments in this simple courtyard in India are not new. Before there were vaccines or medicines of any sort, faith in God was about the only thing people had to ward off disease.
Illness is not divine punishment or miasma of bad air, or as some still believe, an imbalance of bodily humors.
Until 1864, when a brilliant French chemist, Louis Pasteur, unmasked the real causes of human illness.
No, ladies and gentlemen, illness is caused by tiny germs, living organisms in the air all around us, so small you cannot see them, yet so dangerous they can kill you.
And how did you discover these germs?
I will show you. François.
Working with the latest microscopes of his day, Pasteur was able to visualize microorganisms like bacteria for the first time.
These particular germs cause cholera. I found them in the blood of an infected chicken. And these tiny little germs, just like these, that can make us sick. They will even cause some of us in this room to die.
But, Monsieur Pasteur, how do we kill them before they kill us?
That is indeed the question for which I have no answers yet. But I do have some ideas.
Pasteur is keenly aware of experiments performed by an English country physician who in 1796 became convinced that he had found a way to prevent one of the world's deadliest diseases. The physician's name was Edward Jenner. And the disease was smallpox. Jenner noticed that the faces of milkmaids in his parish never showed the telltale scars of smallpox. Yet their hands were often covered with sores from cowpox, a similar but much milder form of smallpox.
Yes, perhaps Perhaps if I go to see you, yes. Daisy, a moment of your time. Come and meet the good doctor. I'd just like to see your hands.
Since none of the maids ever got smallpox, Jenner began to wonder if catching cowpox somehow made one immune to smallpox.
Yes, that's excellent.
So he devised a dangerous plan to see if he was right.
James, come in. Come along, Master Phipps. Now, if you roll up your sleeve...
Jenner took pus from the cowpox scars of the milkmaid and scraped it into an incision made in young James Phipps.
This will only hurt a little, and you're a brave boy, I know.
This gave Phipps a harmless case of cowpox.
All done.
But there was only one way to find out if the boy was now immune to smallpox. Despite the grave risks and questionable ethics, 2 weeks later, Jenner exposed Phipps to a smallpox victim and waited for the results. Fortunately for everyone, Jenner's theory was correct. James Phipps survived, and like the milkmaids, he never got smallpox.
James!
Cowpox had given him immunity.
Something for you, my boy.
Jenner called his discovery a vaccine from the Latin word vaccinia, the medical term for cowpox. Most people were too frightened to try Jenner's revolutionary vaccine, but those who knew of its protective power did. Although no one, not even Jenner, had a clue as to why it actually worked. But almost a century later, Louis Pasteur is determined to find out. He knows cowpox is a weak form of smallpox that can prevent the more harmful disease. If this is a principle for disease prevention, it should work for other germs as well. Pasteur begins testing his theory on animals and successfully makes a vaccine for chicken cholera. But he wishes to go down in history as a savior of human life. So he decides to take on one of the deadliest diseases in the world, rabies. Rabies was and still is an incurable disease caused by a virus, a germ too small for Pasteur to see. But he knows it's there. Using the spinal cords of infected rabbits, Pasteur tries to produce a milder form of rabies for a vaccine. But before he can complete the experiment, events force his hand.
My apologies.
A young boy, Joseph Meister, has been bitten by a rabies-infected dog. In a week, he will likely be dead.
I don't know what to say, but I think it's worth a try. Yes, all right.
But Pasteur doesn't know if his experimental vaccine will kill the boy or save him. He writes about this defining moment in his memoirs.
Joseph Meister would almost inevitably come down with rabies. As the death of the child appeared certain, I decided, not without deep and severe unease, to try the procedure.
Pasteur is not a physician, so he asked the doctor to do the injection.
You're going to have to do it. You have to go in the stomach.
Two weeks later, Pasteur receives a letter.
Dear Monsieur Pasteur, I am feeling good and sleep well, and I have a good appetite. Yours sincerely, Joseph Meister.
Bonsoir.
This breakthrough had a significance far beyond a cure for rabies. Now the human race had a scientifically proven weapon in the war against infectious disease. But ironically, Pasteur, like Jenner before him, couldn't explain how the great discovery worked. Only in the 20th century did scientists finally understand what Jenner and Pasteur had given them. Vaccines can't kill germs the way antibiotics kill bacteria, but they can recruit the body's own defenses to help ward off viruses. When virus used in a vaccine enters the body, the immune system summons two defenders. Antibody proteins mold themselves to the virus to keep it from invading cells. And if a virus does get into a cell, the body sends out another defender, killer T cells, that destroy the invaded cell as well as the virus trapped inside. Because the vaccine contains weak virus, the immune system easily wins. And now these tailor-made antibodies and killer T cells stand guard in the bloodstream, ready to defeat the stronger disease virus should it ever strike. With the development of vaccines for diseases like diphtheria, mumps, and measles, old viral epidemics began to disappear. When Jonas Salk produced an injectable polio vaccine and Albert Sabin made an oral version, many countries organized massive vaccination campaigns that brought this relentless crippler to the brink of eradication. Vaccines were winning the war against viruses in the West. But in poorer countries, most viral diseases still flourished. Even smallpox, the first illness to have a vaccine, continued to claim more lives than any other disease in history. It killed without mercy, bringing a mask of agony to the faces of the dying.
And I remember seeing children with their faces swollen with hemorrhagic smallpox and thinking, isn't this a shame that it's the last view the parents will have of this child?
We had a huge hospital ward filled with smallpox cases. And as you walked past the beds, these people looked so distressed. And you could identify at least half of them who were going to die. A young British physician just put his hands on the balcony rail outside and said, "I cannot again do rounds on a smallpox ward."
In 1967, the World Health Organization decided to mount a global vaccination campaign to wipe out smallpox forever. But the disease was so widespread, experts predicted total eradication was doomed to failure. Even its leader was skeptical.
It was such an overwhelming problem. There was a time where we really had our doubts that we were going to be able to succeed.
For the mammoth task, Henderson recruited young idealists who immediately became known as the Smallpox Warriors. Later, many would rise to prominent positions in the field of public health. But now they were just doing their job, which meant getting the vaccine to extremely remote places.
A number of these had rather long hair. They certainly weren't individuals who were likely to show up and be well received at an embassy cocktail party, but they worked tirelessly. They were real heroes.
And they needed courage because their task was truly daunting. But they were spirited, and they had a vaccine that could be easily administered by scratching the skin with a special serum-laden needle. Smallpox also had characteristics that gave Donald Henderson realistic hope he could break the chain of transmission.
We always knew where it was. Wherever the virus was, the individuals had rash. And we could go into a village and immediately identify whether we've got a problem.
And smallpox could only be transmitted from person to person. There was no animal or insect also carrying the virus. So immunizing as many people as possible could hopefully break the cycle of disease. At the start of the initiative in 1966, 63 countries were reporting smallpox cases. One of the hardest hit was Nigeria, so the Warriors went there first. The plan was to vaccinate 80% of Nigeria's large and widely scattered population. They were relying on a concept called herd immunity, which means if enough of your neighbors are vaccinated, you're unlikely to get the disease. But they soon discovered that vaccinating even 80% of Nigerians was impossible. There were far too many people and not enough vaccine.
We found ourselves looking for an alternative. How do we use the small amount of vaccine we have most efficiently?
Bill Faggy, who directed the campaign in Nigeria, was forced to rely on a strategy called ring vaccination to keep the program alive. When they found a smallpox case, they'd vaccinate only those people in the immediate vicinity of the victim. These vaccination rings would still keep the disease from spreading, even though only 15% of the population would be vaccinated. But if the warriors missed cases outside the rings, all would be lost. The problem was how to locate everyone with smallpox. Bill Faggy turned to Nigeria's extensive network of missionaries for help.
Lokoja Mission Station calling all parishes. Over.
We divided up the geographic area and asked each missionary if they would send runners to every village to find out whether they had smallpox.
If the runners found a case, vaccinators would quickly move in and place a quarantine ring around that village.
Suddenly, we were able to put a mark on every village with smallpox. The bottom line is that smallpox disappeared from this area in a period of weeks, even though we had vaccinated only a minority of the population.
They also latched onto another valuable group who could provide intelligence: school children.
Is there anybody here that knows of someone that has this disease?
By holding up a picture of smallpox and saying, has anyone seen this? We soon found that little boys in particular, between 9 and 13 years of age, knew pretty much everything that was going on and were quite prepared to tell you all about it.
Over there.
Region after region began to fall to this strategy, with ring vaccination always the cornerstone of the plan. After 3 years of determined work, the smallpox campaign triumphed in West Africa. India, with the largest concentration of cases, became the next target for the warriors. But with its massive population, they would need other strategies for success. They recruited thousands of Indian workers to help them find cases. By 1973, they mounted a house-by-house campaign that was so well coordinated, they visited 100 million homes in just 6 days. But what they discovered alarmed them.
In one state where we were getting about 500 cases a week, suddenly the searchers found 11,000 cases in just this 1 week. It was a very black day indeed. There were those who said, you'll never get rid of smallpox in India.
Worse, the disease could easily spread among such a highly mobile population.
In the 1970s, 1% of the Indian population was on a train at any one time. And so you're thinking of millions of people moving around the state.
To try to overcome this problem, they created surveillance and vaccination posts at train stations, and they stood watch at markets and other gathering places.
There is a goddess by the name of Sitala Mata in Hindu mythology to whom villagers would make offerings for her to heal them if they were ill with smallpox. It seemed that it'd be a good idea to post people at the Sitala Mata shrines to learn where smallpox cases were occurring.
They also went into the countryside, where farmers worked long hours in distant fields. To get them to come into the villages to be vaccinated, Faggy enlisted the help of a creative chief.
He said, I'll get them back. And with that, he had his drummer begin pounding on a talking drum. People came flowing into the village. Almost as fast as people move by you, you can vaccinate them. After 2 hours, we'd finally finished everyone. I said, I am very impressed. How do you have such control over your people? He said, I told them on the talking drum to come to the village market if they wanted to see the tallest man in the world. And I guess I look that way to him since I'm 6'7".
By 1975, after 3 years of hard work, India was smallpox-free. This had been the hardest battle of all. The warriors could now smell victory. By 1977, the only cases being reported were in Somalia, in East Africa, mostly among nomadic families who were hard to track down. Later that year, 2 cases appeared in a group of nomads camped near the city of Merka. The victims were children, and a smallpox volunteer, Ali Malmarlin, was sent to bring them to the Merka hospital. Ali himself had been vaccinated, so he didn't fear helping the children. By the time Ali reached them, one child was dying, but he helped the other survive. And anyone who had contact with the children was vaccinated, so there were no more cases. But then the unthinkable happened. Ali Marlin himself came down with smallpox.
Ali was immunized, but he didn't have a take. So the immunization was not successful, and as a result, he was unprotected.
While Ali lay in bed fighting for his life, there were no other cases in Somalia or anywhere else in the world. Could the virus that had plagued millions for centuries finally be confined in just one human body in a remote hospital in Somalia?
For weeks thereafter, we held our breath.
When Ali Marlin finally emerged from the hospital, little did he know that he would become the last victim of this terrible disease, the endpoint in a smallpox chain of person-to-person transmissions stretching back thousands of years. The warriors had won.
I almost had the feeling like having been a soldier in a war, suddenly there was no war, and you'd miss the camaraderie of your colleagues working out there.
This was the greatest public health accomplishment to date. Yes, smallpox eliminated a disease from the world. That disease is no longer present.
The smallpox campaign gave global health leaders the optimism that they could take on any disease as long as they had a vaccine and the warriors to get it out. But smallpox would turn out to be the only worldwide success. And even before the applause had ended, a devastating new virus, HIV/AIDS, rose up to test global health and the power of vaccines as never before. Today, AIDS is on track to kill more people than smallpox, particularly in the disease's old breeding ground, Africa. Sex workers looking for clients in Nairobi, Kenya. It could be any street in any city in Africa. And it's one of the important ways the AIDS virus is spread. Clients of these sex workers become infected and take the disease back home to their families. Charles Wachihi is a Nairobi doctor and an AIDS researcher.
Over 80% of the patients admitted to every hospital have HIV-related complications, ranging from diarrhea to chest infections to meningitis. You have all these people coming in and out, and then they come in and never go out.
AIDS has killed more than 20 million people, most here in Africa.
This is a sad place to be at. Most of the people buried here are between the ages of 20 and 30 years. As a doctor, it does raise a lot of anxiety and confusion in a person.
especially when most of the people who are dying are at the prime of their life.
Charles Wachihi knows the despair of doctors unable to heal their patients.
I had a friend in high school. He died when he was about 23 years old. He's a person you see, he's been sickly, he's getting weak, then a year later he's in the newspaper, obituary.
AIDS sufferers in the West can take powerful antiretroviral drugs that will keep the virus at bay. But in Africa, these medications are far too expensive for most Kenyans to afford. Ada Kadiga is an ordinary, hard-working woman who caught HIV from her husband, who died of AIDS. She used to get free drugs from the hospital where she had a job, but now she's too sick to work and hasn't the money to buy drugs on her own. Dr. Susan Sadenbar has the task of allocating scarce AIDS drugs to her patients.
Okay, so money for you is quite a struggle. Do you have any plans to raise the money so you'll be able to access the drugs?
No.
That is quite worrying.
I cannot sleep because I'm worrying too much how to keep the food on the table. I know that I'm now dying because I live by those drugs now.
So you'd actually feel now that is a death sentence, you're going to die.
If any disease needs a vaccine, it's AIDS.
Africa is doomed without a vaccine. We have about 42 million infected throughout the world, and over 75% in Africa alone.
When AIDS first came on the scene 2 decades ago, I really expected 3 to 5 years we would have an effective vaccine. It's 20 years later, and we still don't have a vaccine.
Over the last 2 decades, researchers have learned that making a vaccine for HIV is extremely difficult because unlike other viruses, it destroys the immune system itself. When HIV enters the body, antibody proteins that try and block it can't attach themselves to the surface of the virus, so it's free to invade any cell it chooses. And it chooses helper T cells, the source of the killer T cells that would normally fight any invading virus. So with no killer T cells or antibodies to stop HIV, the virus keeps reproducing and overwhelms the entire immune system. Scientists have always seen the destruction of the immune system as the main stumbling block to an HIV vaccine. In this vast Nairobi shantytown of 50,000 people, researchers have made a remarkable discovery, which they hope will lead to a vaccine. They found a group of 200 sex workers here in Pumwani who are naturally immune to AIDS. Dr. Wachihi and his nurse Jean are part of an international team studying the AIDS-free prostitutes. One of them, Salome Simon, is starting her day. She's waiting for customers at the door of her house. By nightfall, she may have had 10 partners. Many will have HIV. Yet Salome has remained HIV-free.
I think I'm very lucky and I'm very happy because it's an astonishing way in which God has chosen me.
While Salome is totally free of HIV, Jennifer Wabui, another sex worker, has had the virus for 10 years, yet hasn't developed full-blown AIDS. Charles Wachihi and his researchers want to know what protects Jennifer from AIDS, and could this information be used to make a vaccine?
She is unique in that the immune system is constantly able to recognize HIV virus and continuously destroy it.
A friend of mine, a woman who used to live with me, had AIDS and passed away. If I do get AIDS, that's my destiny.
But Africa's destiny may lie in understanding the special properties of Jennifer's blood. Halfway around the world, at Oxford University, another part of the research team has found that the Pumwani women possess an abnormally high number of killer T cells. This means their killer T cells haven't been destroyed by HIV. In fact, it's just the opposite. The prostitute's killer T cells can actually destroy HIV. They do this by targeting two HIV proteins that always move to the surface of an invaded cell. When this happens, that cell is destroyed, meaning the prostitute's immune system can defeat HIV. Researchers have now learned which genetic fragments of HIV produce these proteins and have begun to inject the fragments into volunteers.
Okay.
Although the fragments alone cannot cause AIDS, the team hopes that by putting them into a vaccine, they will spark the production of the exact kind of killer T cells that protect the Nairobi prostitutes.
My reason for taking part was to try and help. It's one small thing that I can do. I can't go out there and help people in any other way. But by having a few injections and having a few blood tests, then hopefully I can help to have an impact.
At present, they're getting a positive response in 75% of the volunteers, an excellent test result. But no one knows if these vaccine-produced killer T cells will be able to stop a real HIV attack. If the initial trials continue to go well, the next stop will be the streets of Nairobi. 2,000 HIV-negative sex workers and their clients will take the vaccine for 2 years to see if they can remain AIDS-free. But it will take several more years to complete all the trials, and this vaccine, like others being tested, may ultimately end in failure. It's ironic that Nairobi sex workers like Jennifer, who usually spread HIV, may someday prove instrumental in stopping it. But even if the vaccine is successful, it will come too late to save Ada Kadiga. She's now in a hospital, but without drugs and money, her hope has run out.
In terms of the infection rates, the mortality rates, the cost of drugs, that means if we don't have a vaccine, we need actually this vaccine yesterday. We needed it yesterday.
The great power of any vaccine is that it keeps people from getting sick in the first place. No hospitals, no expensive medicines, no fear that a horrible disease can strike at any moment. But for now, when it comes to AIDS, freedom from fear is only a dream. For another global scourge, polio, the battle is almost over. An effective vaccine has existed for decades, and the number of cases worldwide has fallen dramatically. But in Nigeria, the same religious resistance that has thwarted vaccinators in India has caused the vaccine to be banned here. In a country that once had only a few cases left, by 2004, there were more than 600, making Nigeria the largest reservoir of the disease in the world. During the ban, many children have come down with the disease, including 20-month-old Akasim Kasim.
At first, he couldn't even move his head. His hands were not moving like now, and he couldn't move any part of his body.
Akasim is crippled now for life, and his father is devastated. David Heyman, one of the original smallpox warriors, heads the polio eradication program at the World Health Organization in Geneva. With the virus now spreading from Nigeria to countries that had previously been polio-free, Heyman and his team know the whole eradication program is in danger.
What happened when Nigeria stopped immunizing is that one virus made its way to Chad, causing children to be paralyzed in Chad. Then from Chad, the virus went to Central African Republic in the south, the one in yellow. The virus from Chad also went to Sudan, and it caused an outbreak of polio in Sudan, which is still going on.
657 cases so far in Nigeria. If you compare with other countries, basically 80% of the cases in the world are occurring in Nigeria.
To break the logjam in Nigeria, Heyman sought help from Islamic leaders who recommended sending the vaccine to a Muslim-run laboratory in Indonesia for analysis.
We worked behind the scenes helping the country determine what steps they needed to take to prove that the vaccine was safe.
When Indonesia reported the vaccine contained no harmful agents, Nigerian clerics opened the door for vaccinators from Rotary International and UNICEF, who immediately rushed serum to polio-affected areas. A child paralyzed because of the ban is paraded before Nigerian village elders as a warning for all to take polio drops. If they can control polio here, the vaccinators would stand a good chance of stopping the spread to other nations. Resistance to vaccines is not confined to poor countries or to religious objectives. This is Vashon Island off the west coast of America. In this exclusive island community, 4 miles from Seattle, some people claim equally good reasons for rejecting vaccines.
I believe that my children's natural immunity to disease is going to protect them much better than the vaccine. I am concerned about burdening their young bodies with too many challenges, immune system challenges at once.
In truth, there is always a slight chance that any vaccine can produce an unwanted side effect. One of the original smallpox warriors, Bill Faggy, also lives on Vashon Island, but disagrees with the resistors.
I believe what's happened now is that parents do not know what those diseases are like. And so they've lost the fear of the disease, and it's harder for them to get the feeling that they're contributing to something when they can't see that disease anymore.
Parents in this community are part of a growing trend to keep children unvaccinated out of fears, many unfounded, that vaccines may harm them.
You know, there's mercury in vaccinations, and that might have thrown off her immune system.
The side effects are not worth that for my children at this time.
There seems to be some side effects with whooping cough that weren't satisfied in my research.
Who lives ultimately with the repercussions of the decision? This would be the parents.
If this attitude from affluent Vashon Island had surfaced decades earlier, polio would never have been eradicated from the U.S. And this is precisely the problem that vaccinators now face in India as they struggle to defeat this crippling disease forever.
We don't want the vaccines at all. You're giving us all these medicines that make the children weak.
Are you God? Answer me. We only trust God. Allah keeps my child safe. Who are you to keep him safe?
Back in India, polio vaccinators are still trying to win over the religious resistors.
We can't read. What difference does it make?
Why should a child suffer for someone else's mistakes?
It's the will of Allah.
But Allah has given us brains.
What? It's up to Allah to decide. You're showing me a cartoon?
Please trust me and look. Just because of one small mistake, that child walks like this.
So they're trying to explain to the father that this is an important thing inherently. And I think we may have cracked it.
The persuasive powers of the vaccinators have finally won the day. 2 precious drops of vaccine are given orally, and an indelible mark put on the small finger acts as a record. One more child will never get polio. Months of door-to-door persuasion has seemingly brought resistance in northern India to an end. Vaccinators are now ready for October 10th, 2004, when the full campaign to vaccinate India's under 5s will begin. And they will have to reach all the children, because with polio, you can never be sure who carries the disease and who doesn't.
Smallpox eradication was easy compared to polio eradication. All people who were infected with the smallpox virus actually showed signs and symptoms. They had terrible blisters on their face.
But polio remains hidden in the population, so 2 million vaccinators will have to find and vaccinate every child under 5 in just 1 or 2 days.
Make sure everything's going back. Keep back.
In Aligarh, Nason Saba and Dr. Sudip Singh are ready.
Well, this is it. This is the big day, the culmination of weeks of concerted effort at all levels.
With its overcrowding and pockets of resistance, Aligarh will be one of the most difficult assignments in India. And with thousands of children to reach, Nason knows the vaccinators have to get to their post quickly.
If they've got their vaccine, they need to move out. It's past 8 o'clock, and the official start time of this thing is 8.
By mid-morning, the campaign is in high gear. This is Vaccination Indian style, a vast pageant of parades, rallies, and street theater. The goal is to get every child to one of the 350 vaccination stations that have been set up throughout the city.
See the microplastic?
But behind the scenes, there are problems for Nason and Sudip to overcome, even at the very first vaccination station they visit.
Did you have the names?
Yes. Namaskar, Bhaiya ji.
Unlike smallpox vaccine, polio vaccine deteriorates quickly when it's taken from the ice packs. So heat-sensitive labels on the vials turn different warning colors as the fluid passes through 4 stages of deterioration.
How many stages are there?
2, 3. No, 3.
It's 4. Is this what you call training, you shameless creature? Don't you feel ashamed?
When were they last trained?
She did not get trained in this round. She was last round.
How about this gentleman?
You haven't been to training, have you?
No. Okay, that's okay.
He didn't go. Don't tell me fairy tales. Why did you replace a team member without telling anyone?
To keep the program on track here, Nason and Sudip have to replace these workers with a properly trained team. Meanwhile, more and more join in the campaign. And there is good news. School children are bringing out their younger siblings for vaccination, just as they were asked to. There is a momentum building, but Nason and Sudip have to make sure everyone is doing their job correctly. The spread of disease by people on trains, first noted by the smallpox warriors, is no less real today. If vaccinators can't get to children on the move, the whole polio campaign will be lost. Yet this post is clearly missing scores of targets. They've only vaccinated 72 children over the entire morning.
Sudip, it's 72 kids, man.
There's more on the platform.
There's 72 kids an hour here.
We have more than 72 children on this platform alone. Don't you see how many children there are here?
Sudip, ask them how they're doing it. Wouldn't it be better to get a train? Are they boarding the train? Are they catching trains as they come in?
We're not here just for fun. You've got to hop onto trains and ask people to get their kids vaccinated.
So Sudip boards a train and shows them how it should be done.
Has your child had polio drops?
By nightfall in Aligarh, the rallies are still going strong. By morning, they will know just how successful their campaign has been.
Where is the child map for this village?
It seems the vast majority in Aligarh have indeed been vaccinated. But now an exhausted Nason and Sudip have to lead a smaller team to root out children who have missed their drops.
One child in this house. House number 12. 2 children here. Huh? Can we go check the houses? Sure.
The only way to get to stragglers is to go house by house, checking the finger markings. It's a tedious process that will take a week.
Are there any children under 5 in there?
The next house to yours. How many children under 5 live there?
None.
You saying there aren't any?
None.
The map says there is one.
We need to become the masters of information about all children under 5. We're like the guardians, right? We should know better than anybody else in the village the condition, the welfare of the children under 5. Work on that?
In the weeks and months that followed, there were no new cases of polio in Aligarh. And throughout India, fewer and fewer cases are appearing.
X, so X means no children. No children.
David Heyman, who runs the polio program for the WHO, visits rural Indian villages to see if isolated infections are still occurring. He goes to one town where polio had been rife.
Does he think the child is regaining some strength, is that right? So she's having physical therapy. See this one? And this is the leg.
Heyman believes that the handful of paralyzed children he finds here could be the very last polio victims in India.
I speak for all of the people working on polio eradication that when the last case of polio does occur, there will be a great satisfaction that, again, a disease has disappeared from the world.
Have they taken? Have they had?
An exhausted Nason Saba echoes these sentiments.
I think I'm going to feel a tremendous sense of pride when those last 2 drops of oral polio vaccine are delivered.
Have all their brothers and sisters taken? Tell them to go out. It's their challenge. It's their challenge. All of their friends under 5.
Here in India, the scourge of polio may finally be over, though sadly the Nigerian outbreak has spurred isolated cases in Africa and elsewhere. Getting to this point would never have happened without the hundreds of millions of parents all over the world who've had their own children vaccinated for polio.
So when we give vaccines, it's both because we want to protect our children, but also because we have a social contract that in living in this society, we also try to protect other children. Vaccines are absolutely the foundation stone of public health.
Vaccines are society's best protection against infectious disease. When we do not have them, we humans are vulnerable to the worst effects of virtually any infectious disease. But where they have worked, childhood death and disability has dropped dramatically and given all the world's people the chance for a longer and healthier life.
Coming up next on RX for Survival. Penicillin and other antibiotics saved millions of lives and changed medicine forever. But now some germs have developed resistance, and old diseases are making a deadly comeback.
Times are changing. Bacteria is getting smarter and smarter.
Can new drugs be developed before it's too late? Stay tuned for Rise of the Superbugs, Part 2 of RX for Survival.
PBS will return in a moment.